In this Blender 3D modeling tutorial, I'm going to show you how to export an OBJ from Blender and then clean up the mesh in instant meshes so it's remeshed and able to be imported into Fusion 360. Now that the scan has been cleaned up in Blender, it's ready to export. But notice that it still has so many triangles. We need to remesh this so it's a little bit easier to use in a parametric modeling program like Fusion 360. Make sure you have the object selected that you want to export. File, Export OBJ. Make sure that you click Selection Only, then Export OBJ. Then open up Instant Meshes. Inside Instant Meshes, open Mesh. Navigate to where your mesh is, select it, and click Open. Once the mesh is inside Instant Meshes, you can orbit around with the left mouse button to see what's happening with your mesh. You can remesh as quads, triangles. Most likely you want to choose quads. We'll leave the default extrinsic configuration. We'll also leave the default target vertex count. Then under orientation field, simply click Solve. This puts all these lines all over your mesh. And you can see sometimes they make a lot of sense going down the neck here. Other times they may split and branch in places that you don't want to have. These singularities are poles where there's more than 5 pieces of the mesh coming together. In instant meshes, you can use the comb tool to align different parts of your mesh to go the way you want. For example, if I want the jawline to definitely curve down, I can draw on the mesh just like this, and then it's going to resolve and direct those meshes this way. I can also draw down the neck and have it branch out. And sometimes you'll have less singularities, sometimes you'll have more. A singularity isn't a problem. What you want is the geometry to flow around the face as expected. Here we could probably delineate the flow of the eyes right here. So I'll take the comb and I'll just draw around the eyes. As you can see now, that flows around. I can also do this over on the forehead, on the eye here, across the forehead there. A lot of times the nose has some issues. Off click the comb, left mouse button to navigate, mouse wheel to scroll, comb here, go over the nose. Also can delineate the lips. Then click Solve for the position field. Now you can see where the mesh is going to develop. You can use the position field brush tool to help line up the edges. And if I want to line up any other meshes, for example, along the collar of the shirt, it can help line up those fields. And depending on how you select things and what you need for your mesh, that can help. You can also come back to the comb tool, orbit around, see anything else you need to do with your meshes. For example, here we have some meshes that we could probably have line up a little bit better. I think that wraps around a bit nicer. Wrap around on the back there. So continue to do this until you have a nice looking combing across your mesh, and the same thing for the position field. Click Solve again, and we can see where there may or may not be issues. Orbit around and see if you see any strange parts of your mesh that aren't making sense. You can see how we have some nice going around the eyes here. You could further delineate the brow. One thing you may want to try to delineate are the lips. So just depending on what you need for your particular application, continue to refine. Once you're ready to export your mesh from Instant Meshes, click Export Mesh. Then click Extract Mesh. You'll see a preview of the mesh that you're going to get. You can orbit around and look to see if there's anything you don't like, and then you can go back now and make changes. If you want a pure quad mesh, click this checkbox, but then make sure you use Extract Mesh again. When you use pure quad, it's going to have a lot more geometry. So depending on what your use case is, you can decide. You can also add smoothing iterations. So if I add a couple smoothing iterations, then extract the mesh, you'll notice that it has a smoother appearance, which can be helpful depending on if you're using an organic mesh. Then once you have the mesh that you're happy with, click Save and save your instant mesh. Now we have a much simpler mesh that we can use in our projects.